I did notice him, and I thought this guy's got a great structure and great potential. I like to think I was very good at recognizing potential. I saw Ronnie Coleman before he was really recognized.
First, just to let you all know, I've started my first clothing collection. So yeah, do make sure to check out all the high quality clothing I've designed at teespring.com. Check for the link in the description box or the pinned comment beneath this video. Six-time Mr. Olympia, the Shadow Dorian Yates, is one of the most iconic bodybuilders from the 90s. He was massive and shredded. Yates was known as the Shadow because all other bodybuilders had to live in his shadow. During his prime, over 6 Mr. Olympia wins, he was the man who took bodybuilding to new heights by creating mass monsters aesthetics. He kept pushing the boundaries, he kept winning, and each year revealed physique and continued to shock and awe. In Yates' time, competing at the pro level of bodybuilding was a very different story than what you see today. When it comes to Ronnie, it'd be safe to say Ronnie Coleman changed the sport of bodybuilding forever. A few years down the line, we wouldn't be surprised to see people categorizing bodybuilding into pre and post Coleman eras, and his workouts were brutal. Coleman saw what Dorian Yates had started and pushed it to its limits. Before Yates, bodybuilders primarily focused on muscle symmetry and conditioning, but he turned the game. Dorian Yates got so huge that he single-handedly turned the bodybuilding events into freak shows. Ronnie Coleman took it to a whole new level and outsized all his opponents on stage. Ronnie Coleman won the Mr. Olympia title for 8 consecutive years and came to be known as the king of bodybuilding. The muscle mass wars we see today on Mr. Olympia stage are Coleman's and Dorian Yates' givings. Nevertheless, how did Dorian Yates react once his streak had to be bested by Ronnie Coleman? At this point, Yates had already retired due to injuries. There was no way for him to bring his best as we had seen during his prime, but there is no denying that any of these top athletes haven't had a true hunger and competitive spirit. But do you think that Ronnie's high level of success made Yates wonder, what if? Dorian didn't seem to be bothered by that at all. He had come to terms with the fact that there was already an athlete who achieved 8 wins before him. He also mentioned that he saw potential in Ronnie from the beginning.
And saw him in the 92 Mr. Olympia, the first one I won in Finland. I believe that was his first Mr. Olympia, unless I'm mistaken. And he didn't place very highly, but I did notice him. And I thought this guy's got a great structure and great potential. If he would have been Mr. Olympia, I just knew he had the potential. Whether that's going to be achieved or not is a different question, and I didn't know Ronnie personally well enough to know his mentality at that point, so whether he would be able to do that. But later on I could see that he was very dedicated.
I on to say, I do remember I was in New York in 1998 because I did officially make my retirement speech. The speech was quite an emotional time for me, and I remember that contest well. And somebody said to me, Ronnie could take this. And I kind of thought, wow, I don't think Ronnie is going to beat Flex. Because, you know, comparing the best that I'd seen before, the two of them, but Ronnie had made some great improvements at the time of that year, and he was the winner. So yeah, he was in great shape. He had the size, but it was also very defined and in good shape. I and everyone else there recognized that there was an athlete in him, and he was the winner. There is a tale with 2 distinct halves. From the 1992 till 97, Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman were in the same lineup 8 times. Ronnie won all 8 contests, but that tells only half the story. The one about Yates, his 6 indomitable years as Mr. Olympia. None of the frustrating quirks of history. They were never even in the same call-up. We never got to see them face to face when at their very best. Bodybuilding has to this point been dominated by dynasties or eras, but it is impossible to sum up the sport's history with a series of names like Arnold, Haney, Yates, Coleman, Cutler, Phil Heath. Each man racked up multiple victories and helped to change the sport's trajectory. Some, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, pushed bodybuilding into mainstream. Others, like Ronnie Coleman and Lee Haney, set it at near impossible standards for the era. Dorian Yates helped to change the way fans and competitors thought about bodybuilders' physique. From 1992 to 1997, Yates' ever-growing physique brought a new level of muscularity and leanness few had seen before. Though he'd been on the bodybuilding circuit for years prior, 1992 marked Yates' iconic showcase. The 30-year-old Dorian Yates stepped on the stage in Helsinki Ice Hole in Finland, weighing roughly 260 pounds, with conditioning so impressive that people could see his muscle fibers. A level of leanness now known as grainy, Yates was the first bona fide mass monster in bodybuilding. In essence, Yates' era moved the needle from the aesthetics of Arnold, Zane, Banout, and Haney to mass monster era of Coleman, Cutler, and Heath, and more recently Big Ramy. But this was not to everyone's liking. Yates was criticized for his bubble gut and his excessive muscularity at multiple points during his career. There is no denying, however, that he brought something remarkable to the Olympia stage. His most impressive showing, 1993, is downright incredible. Yates posing in particular always played to the idea that Yates was some sort of freakish monster. A prime example of this was the 1996 German Grand Prix. Yates' posing included a call line voiceover, which directed him to
Please press 1. For signature pose, please press 2.
him to pose. It of course seemed to signify his machine-like efficiency. Yates' most famous critique during this time was none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger. During the 1990s, Arnold criticized bodybuilding, which he believed privileged muscle mass over things like symmetry and appearance. For this reason, Arnold criticized Yates at several turns for embodying this mass monster look. Arnold and those who championed the golden age of bodybuilding called for a stricter drug testing protocols, which they believed would curb the excesses deemed to be ruining the sport. Fans of the 1990s bodybuilders, on the other hand, claimed that Yates was pushing the boundaries of what was possible. If you didn't know, now you know where one falls on the Yates and Schwarzenegger divide. It's largely a matter of personal preference and how they came to the sport of bodybuilding. For those who grew up watching Pumping Iron, the Mass Monster era was ruining the sport. For later fans, Yates represented an evolution regardless of these debates, which continue in bodybuilding circles. There is no denying Yates' pivotal role in this. Yates' muscularity and leanness raised expectations of what a champion bodybuilder looked like. But when fans hear the name Ronnie Coleman, they think of this mythical figure lifting unfathomable weights for reps and looking like a real-life comic book hero. When he posed on stage throughout his 8-year reign as Mr. Olympia, he got bigger and bigger every year with a harder diet and training, of course. Many of those lifts include 800-pound deadlifts and squats, benching 500 pounds, doing dumbbell bench presses with 200-pound dumbbell, and even 2,300-pound leg presses. Those lifts, among others, are what he credits to helping him defeat fellow legends like Jay Cutler, Flex Wheeler, and Kevin Levrone on the biggest stages in bodybuilding. Unfortunately, more recent years have been a different story. Coleman has been facing more than 10 different surgeries to help him overcome injuries that plagued him after he retired from the stage.
Because y'all know, my last surgery was real rough. But, you know, I just want to thank you guys for praying for me. Because without y'all, I don't think I'd be walking right now. But all the inspiration you guys are providing for me, I really appreciate it. So keep praying for your boy. Yeah, buddy. Lightweight, baby. It still ain't nothing but a peanut.
The debate has raged about how much of a factor those famous lifts were on his issues. There was much discussion about whether he should ever train again because of the potential risks. However, that type of mass and dominance takes its toll on the human body, and he has the damage to prove that. Over the years, his back has been severely injured, with the majority of his spine being fused with countless surgeries. But no worries though, since he's gotten a lot better over the years since then. He's also been hitting the gym just about every day. When Dorian first had his first injury, he decided to retire after his last sixth Mr. Olympia. But what could have happened if Dorian Yates didn't retire after his sixth win? That's a question that pops up in many fans' mind. When looking back to bodybuilding's past, the truth of the matter is that Dorian couldn't continue to compete. His tricep tear was very serious and caused Dorian to earn his final Olympia victory. He knew then that he would rather go out than continue towards a downward path. If Dorian Yates never tore his tricep muscle, he would have continued his laser focus on pro bodybuilding. While Dorian did have some feeling that he might want to soon retire, he described his final few years as feeling more like a job than a passion. It was likely that his dedication to the sport would have kept him going strong. Many fans most likely wish this could have been the case. He was a six-time Mr. Olympia champion. If he hadn't gotten injured, perhaps he could have continued dominating for a few more years. Instead, Dorian won his final Mr. Olympia by an extreme close margin. It was over. Dorian Yates' prime years of bodybuilding were behind him. He decided to end it on top rather than slowly peter out. The injury forced him into retirement. This had then altered his entire lifestyle. Today, Dorian Yates maintains a smaller physique, focuses on meditation, and maintains a healthy lifestyle. He's focused now on longevity. Dorian Yates claimed to be thankful for the injury. It forced him to do something better for his future health. He might not have seen it that way at the time. Perhaps it was all for the better. He still stands as one of the most legendary bodybuilders in history of the sport. Would a few more Olympia wins change that? Probably not. In the end, he received change in lifestyle, a possible longer and healthier future, and is still seen as a legend. He got to have his cake and eat it too. All it took was an extreme tricep tear. Not to mention that his last Mr. Olympia goes down as one of the most controversial Mr. Olympia to date. Fans who believed that Nasser got robbed that year, which Dorian completely denies that claim to this day, that he was robbed at the stage, and he summarized into that Nasser actually came in unprepared. But the only competitor Dorian believes that could have beaten him in Mr. Olympia was the Flex Wheeler. The 90s saw a major shift in competitive bodybuilding. During that shift, we saw the emergence of mass monsters like Dorian Yates. While he dominated 90s bodybuilding, he had many talented challengers. One was Flex Wheeler, who gave Yates all he could handle. In fact, in an interview, Dorian Yates said that if not for Flex Wheeler missing the 94 Olympia, his rival could have beaten him. Dorian Yates always had proficiency in building quality muscle. After all, Yates was the first mass monster to dominate the bodybuilding world. He was a massive figure during his heyday and turned back every challenge that came his way after winning his first Mr. Olympia championship in 1992. But every step of the way, Flex Wheeler proved to be a massive challenge for the reigning champion. But misfortune would strike when Flex Wheeler found himself in a car accident that would see him missing in 1994. Even Dorian Yates admitted that in 1994, if that car accident did not happen to Flex Wheeler, he had a great chance at defeating him on the stage. He used that same mentality to speak up about the fitness industry and their tendency to favor aesthetic workouts that make you look good over practical exercises to help him with life and so on. Nevertheless though, at the end of the day, people like Flex Wheeler, Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman will always be a valued member of the bodybuilding community, and their opinions are always worth giving attention to.